What's up, everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of The Limit. Thank you to all of those who tuned into my World Cup special. And now we're on to the new Premier League season. I'm going to cover bold predictions, the title race, why I'm not backing Arsenal to retain it, full sort of 1 to 20 picks, golden boot, player of the season, sign of the season, all of that jazz, and all of the predictions made before a ball has been kicked. At the time of recording, we are 48 hours away from what will be the end of Arsenal versus Coventry. Really excited to see them back in the Prem. But if we're going to start with bold predictions, my first one is that I think there's going to be 3 genuine title contenders. And this will be the first genuine title race since the 2013-2014 season. As we know, that was the first Premier League season without Sir Alex Ferguson. And this will be the first season without Pep Guardiola in a very, very long time. Now, if we look back to that campaign, there was a lot of Suarez magic at Liverpool. He almost took them all the way to their first Premier League title at that time. But the Gerrard slip happened. Mourinho was back at Chelsea. Remember him running down the touchline doing this. And if you haven't watched the documentary, whether you're a Chelsea fan or not, definitely worth tuning in. And then it, of course, ended with Manchester City and Pellegrini's side getting over the line, getting that done. But quite genuinely, all 3 of those clubs had a very, very, decent chance of winning the Prem. And it was completely different to, when people will immediately say, oh, what about the 23-24 season? Well, Liverpool were in the race for most of that. And as we know, and I take a bit of, I can't say pride because I wasn't playing, but being a Manchester United fan, I think about them losing 4-3 at Old Trafford with that Amad Diallo last-minute winner in the FA Cup. And then the 2-2 draw in the Premier League at Old Trafford, which sort of saw Liverpool start to slip from first downwards. They lost to Palace after that and had a collapse in pretty much, all competitions. So, yeah, that season ended obviously with Man City pipping Arsenal to the title. But Arsenal, we have to pay them their dues. They did win it last year. And I know a lot of people are talking about them potentially, going on and winning back-to-back Premier Leagues. But it's always harder to replicate the success of the previous year. And Arsene Wenger didn't even ever manage to win back-to-back Premier League titles. So it is a real big ask for Mikel Arteta and his men to get it done. And I know their defence is really good, but it's not as strong and as formidable as, the Chelsea one that only conceded 15 goals. I mean, that, like John Terry has said, that's a stat will never, ever get broken. It's not as good as when Manchester United had Van der Sar, Vidic, Evra, Rio, that great defence. It's not even as good as, I know Liverpool, didn't win it, but, the defence that they had when they had Alisson, Van Dijk and that strong spine that won the Champions League. I just think that Arsenal could get exposed. I think they'll do what they do best and finish second, but I just don't think they have enough firepower to make up for, what other teams could do. And I'm just really excited to see how competitive this season's going to be, because now that Pep is gone, yes, he's defined this modern era of English football, but the big question is what happens to Manchester City? I think despite all the money that they've spent, they probably are the biggest coin flip in the league for me this season, because yes, with the money that they've thrown at it, they could go on and still be successful, but I'm not convinced by Maresca. And I think we've seen with Chelsea when they moved from Roman Abramovich to Todd Boehly that quite simply throwing money doesn't always mean that it's going to work. And Pep has sort of not covered cracks in the way that Fergie did on the back end of, what he did with Manchester United and winning the Premier League title in his last season with Robin Van Persie. But, Pep has always sort of managed to make things work. I mean, there was even that period where they were buying a new left back every season for 50 million. They bought a bunch of them. And I just think Pep, he knows how to get the best out of players. He's a great man manager. His style of play is amazing. And it's going to be really hard for City to have sustained success like they did under him. This could, in a way, be how it was when David Moyes had his first season at Manchester United. So let's see. I'm not necessarily saying they're going to collapse to 7th like we did, but I think they're in for a rude awakening. The biggest thing saving them is Erling Haaland. If I'm just going to throw it out there, for me, he is going to be the Premier League top scorer. But if there is someone who could push him, my dark horse is João Pedro, because I'm really excited to see what Xabi Alonso can do for Chelsea. But ultimately, significant drop for Man City. And when I think about Pep leaving the Premier League and what that means for English football, I mean, goals have sort of been heading in the complete opposite direction, especially in the last 2 years, as people have sort of adapted, wanting to take on and implement their own way of the way that Pep played. It's it's even throughout the Championship now where we see inverted fullbacks or like wing backs drifting into central midfield and people's obsession with having an out and out number 10. But in 23-24 there were 1,246 goals. That's a Premier League record of an average of 3.28 per game. That has dropped in the last 2 years. That's gone to 1,115 the following year, 2.93, and then the season just gone 1,045, 2.75 per game. Now, I know some people might point to VAR, but, considering that we've dropped by pretty much 201 goals across the last 2 years, it's been declining. I actually think that the record is going to be broken this year. So that means that we need roughly a 19% increase, 202 more, but I'm expecting lots of different styles of play. There's obviously a lot of new managers in the Premier League as well, and they're going to want to implement their own ideas, not just at the big clubs. We see the moves that have been made: Palace, Forest, Tottenham still technically count with, De Zerbi coming in the back end of the year. Chelsea, Carrick's only coming in Jan. Areola's in at Liverpool. Maresca in at Man City. Really the only, Rose in at Bournemouth. There's a lot of changes there, and I just think it's going to be really exciting this year. So, yeah, as much as Pep Guardiola, we have a lot to, let's say, thank. I'll say that reluctantly, for his influence over English football in the last decade. I think that the structure, build-up and playing for the back might change a bit. We could see a lot more transitions, a lot more risk, a lot more direct football, and really excited to see where that goes. But going back to a point that I made when I was first talking and talking about why Arsenal, I don't think they will go back-to-back. The main reason for me really is that they have never done it historically. And if you think about some of the great teams they had, when we talk about a team that won it in 96, 97, one that in 01, 02, Sylvain Wiltord won, unfortunately, at Old Trafford, if I'm right. And then also when they come second in 03, 04 off the back of, what they did with the Invincible season. There's some formidable Arsenal teams, and arguably all of them better than the crop that won it last year. Now they're trying to retain it. As much as people talk about consistency with Arteta there, I just don't think they're dominant enough to win titles. I spoke about that great Mourinho team that only let 15 goals in and some other great Premier League teams. I just don't think that this style of football is going to, that you can play this way and win it again. For me, I think that title number 21 is going to go to either Manchester United or Liverpool. Now, a lot of people talked up Chelsea. Those are the three that I think could potentially, win the Premier League. But I'm going to caveat a few things. I don't see United and Liverpool both putting up a title fight. It's going to be obviously interesting for Michael Carrick and United to see how we cope with, the squad depth from playing in the Champions League. The man behind me, Marcus Rashford, drawing by a good friend of mine, Wayne Shaw. Big shout out to him. Big thank you. Really excited to see him back. For anyone who knows me, they know that my cat is named after Marcus Rashford. And I just think that, either Carrick's going to get things clicking and there's going to be that magic that continues for when he coming in January, or Areola, phenomenal manager, almost getting Bournemouth into the Champions League. Obviously has that blueprint DNA of, him playing at Bilbao and the way that they've always... But I think that's almost a seamless transition, and maybe even, the same way where Klopp came from Dortmund. I can see him having big success. The big key, obviously, is to keep Isak fit. We know Ekitike is out for a while, but Florian Wirtz, another great player who I think if Liverpool do win the Premier League, he will be the player of the season. I think people have underestimated how good this guy is. He's got all the ability in the world to be one of the best players in the world. And this is coming from me, who's obviously, a fan of a rival team. If Manchester United win it, if we get it done, I think Matheus Cunha, he has stepped up and been massive since we signed him. Obviously, we've done similar things in terms of getting Yuri Tielemans. And I like that we've done this thing of buying proven players from Premier League teams and not going overseas and making mistakes that we've made in the transfer window ever since Fergie's gone. Fergie used to do it a lot. Tevez, Berbatov, Carrick himself. A lot of guys who go and get from other Premier League teams and, turn that to even Antonio Valencia from Wigan. He just had a knack for doing that. And I think that if United do win the league, I reckon Cunha is the guy. Great goal at the Emirates, important goals against the likes of Chelsea and elsewhere. I think he can take his game to another level. We saw what he did with Brazil in the World Cup. Yes, they didn't reach the heights that some people thought. I think that I did predict actually, but really like him. And yeah, one of those two, Cunha or Wirtz, for player of the season. And I do think one of them will win the league. The other will finish fourth. Chelsea, for me, if I look beyond that, they will be third. I do think they're a genuine title contender, and I see them being third regardless. But for me, this caveat basically is Arsenal are not going to drop off massively, but I think they'll come second. So we're going United or Liverpool, Arsenal, Chelsea, and then the other one fourth. Manchester City with this post-Pep drop. It's not going to be as bad as it was for Moyes when he was at us for a very short-lived period. But yeah, they are the biggest wild card right now. No one really knows where to put them. I can't not put Aston Villa sixth simply because of how much I rate Unai Emery and the job he's done there. Obviously, massive shout out to them for winning the Europa League. I'm going Brighton seventh. A lot of people are obviously talking about Spurs. Now, I actually like Spurs. Manchester United and Spurs don't have, any animosity. And I always talk them up. And I do think they could be in for a good season. But the fact that they finished 17th 2 years in a row, I think between 10th and 8th for me. I really like the signings they made. I do think they've overpaid a bit for Mateus Fernandes. I did want him at Old Trafford, but not for that amount. Tonali, weirdly, is going to contradict myself. I think he's probably worth that money because he's such a phenomenal footballer. Van Hecke, great signing at the back. Senesi as well. So, yeah, they could get to 8th for me. I do think Bournemouth, 9th. Antonio Silva, for me, could be signing the season. Really exciting to see what he can do in terms of that centre-back position. And obviously, they've got more games to play this season with European football, but, still think that they'll be top 10 again. I'm going Everton 10th. Hayden Hackney, he is a guy that I'm really excited about. Did really well at Middlesbrough in the Championship. Was expecting, if Middlesbrough had come up, then I think he would have stayed for one more year, but excited to see what he can do there. Newcastle, we all expect them to regress, right? Considering all the players they've sold and Eddie Howe leaving. But I'm still going to go 11th. Leeds 12th. Think they comfortably survive. Fulham 13th. Forest 14th. Frank Lampard getting Coventry to 15th. I mean, I really like Frank Lampard. Was always a big fan of him as a player. Always weirdly preferred him in the Scholes-Gerrard Lampard debate. I think just because of the knack he had of the box-to-box stuff and then becoming a deep-lying playmaker when Chelsea won the Champions League. And I spoke about this, with lots of friends of mine and spoke about it, I think, a little bit in the World Cup preview that I did. Mikel Arteta, as a player, still a professional footballer, they play in a way that he did as a player, a bit nitty-gritty. The best managers now tend to be ex-great footballers, and especially midfield players. We look at Pep Guardiola and Luis Enrique. And I do see a lot of that in Frank Lampard's development. Yes, he didn't have the best time at Everton, but he did really well in his first spell at Chelsea. Did well at Derby. He's got Coventry back into the Premier League. And I think long-term for me, he could potentially be, I would want him to be the England manager. Maybe now is too soon, but by that 2030 World Cup, he could be the guy who's in charge. So really excited to see what he does with Coventry this season. Hopefully he gets them higher, maybe stays one more year, or then maybe goes on to another job between that and getting the big call up for the Three Lions. But excited there. And that is also, by the way, my logic for why I think Manchester United would do well under Michael Carrick. Again, I have to talk about my team. I just think the tutelage that he's had to, play under Fergie for all those years, play under Van Gaal, have some coaching under Mourinho. Everyone who knows me knows how much I love Ollie, and I think he was really underappreciated. And, Ollie always spoke about how top Carrick, was in terms of that coaching staff. He's had so many little different influences, and he'll see the game in a way that Xabi Alonso will. Alonso always talked about him as a player and how good Carrick was, and he would probably be in a Spain national team. Under 40 caps for, England is just crazy to me. But those two guys in the Premier League, the way they saw the game in their era in the Premier League, were the two best holding mids. I both think they'll do fantastically. But anyway, I've digressed. Coventry 15th, Sunderland 16th, Palace 17th or 18th. Now, this is my big, again, another caveat similar to United or Liverpool winning the league. I think Palace or Brentford are going down. Now, Brentford were my surprise relegation pick. I don't know if it's fair to say surprise last year. Surprise more in the way that they ended up, because I think a lot of people had them going down. But I do think that Brentford or Palace are going to go. I think Sangare, the new player that they signed from Lens or Lens, however we're going to pronounce it, anyone listening's going to laugh. But I think that, he is probably going to be... They paid big money for him, and if Brentford do go down, he potentially will be the guy who is maybe the flop signing of the season. Then Hull and Ipswich, put them whichever way you want. They're both getting relegated. You can decide who finishes bottom. But that's my Premier League table. I will put a graphic of it up. If not in the episode, I will post it, ahead of Friday to showcase that. And golden boot for me, like I said, Haaland or João Pedro pushing him close. Player of the season, Wirtz or Cunha. I mean, even if neither of those teams, Manchester United or Liverpool, win the Premier League, I do still think either of them could be an option. Signings of the season to watch out for: Antonio Silva, Hayden Hackney, and then I guess those are more the younger guys. Van Hecke or Tonali, I do think could also be that player of the season, because if Spurs jump from 17th to 8th, or even a little bit higher, naturally the media and a lot of people are going to lean towards picking a Spurs player. So maybe it's more saying, if we're talking in American terms, a breakout player will be Antonio Silva or Hayden Hackney. Flop of the season, I said, Ibrahim Sangare. Just sort of connects with Brentford's relegation pick. And then first manager sacked, really annoying, because in our WhatsApp chat where we talk a lot about football, me and some mates, I said Eddie Howe would be first to go. Not more because I thought the hierarchy at Newcastle would get fed up and he would be frustrated with the signings, and that's happened in another way because he's now left. So basically, I'm going with Pierre Sarg from Crystal Palace or Sergej Djurkovic from Hull. Really getting to the point, if anyone has made it to the 18-minute mark, where I'm worried about butchering half the pronunciations and doing my best Paul Merson, but I've not called anyone salami, so that is also good. I'm not compared anyone to food, if anyone remembers that reference from Soccer Saturday. But yeah, I mean, that is where I'm at with my final prediction for the Premier League. And, excited to be doing another episode. Like I said, was really nice to see a lot of people watching the YouTube shorts on the World Cup. I got it right with Spain winning the World Cup. So, again, particularly happy with that. A decent amount of views from a first episode. We're talking about a small subject, 65. So, really appreciate everyone who listened or on Spotify or watched. Please go and subscribe and, follow on Instagram. Really bad at selling myself in this regard, but, obviously have a big following on TikTok, but follows there, much appreciated as well. Subscribing on YouTube, tuning in and listening on Spotify, and then also some Insta follows would be much appreciated. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments. I hope you enjoy the Premier League season. I hope I'm right and Manchester United do win it, and I hope we get title 21, and I hope I'm in Manchester celebrating at the parade next May. I'll be saving every one of these picks, and we'll come back maybe midway point, do a little point halfway through the season when there's a bit of a gap, or definitely at the end of the season to see how many I've got horribly wrong. And then in terms of what's next, well, we're going to be heading across to the NFL for plenty of 2026 previews. A lot of content to come there. Obviously, everyone knows how big of an NFL fan I am. And before we know it, I'll be at the international games doing plenty of content and lots of stuff to be excited there. Weekly picks, etc. Anything that you want to see, feel free to comment and let me know. I know the Premier League episode was asked for when I did the poll. Actually tied with the F1 season. I feel like F1's been a little bit underwhelming, but the Premier League won't be. So I'll see you soon. Enjoy all of the campaign. And yeah, I'm out.